Welcome to the March 2nd Council meeting. I'd like to note that all members are present. Councilman Hargrove is on the telephone. If you'd please stand and join us in the flag salute. It's going to be led by Mayor Pro Tem Lucio.
Put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Ballantyne, do we have any agenda additions or deletions or revisions?
I have no changes to the agenda, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is public announcements. To begin, I'd like to highlight a couple of items that are listed under the consent calendar on our agenda. The Mayor's Home Beautification Award. I'd like to recognize Jerry Mendoza for being awarded the March 2021 Mayor's Home Beautification Award, and there's a picture on the TV. Because of your dedication and pride in home ownership, you've helped make Chino a more attractive place to work, live, and enjoy. I want to thank you, Mr. Mendoza, for all of your hard work and everything that you do. National Nutrition Month is March 2021. We're adopting or have adopted a proclamation. And I'd like to stress that providing quality nutrition for information to our residents is of paramount concern for the city of Chino. We recognize that understanding and practicing healthy eating is not only a matter of discipline, but also a matter of education and accessibility. Through our collaboration with SOAR and the High Five After School programs, along with our Community Garden and Discovery Workshop series, Chino has certainly made it a priority to give our youth and community the tools needed to live a healthy lifestyle. Therefore, on behalf of the City Council, I would like to reiterate our commitment to providing these opportunities and proclaim March 2021 as National Nutrition Month. Also, I'd like to give another early reminder that on Saturday, March 20th, 2021, the city will be holding its annual Cultural Palooza event at the Chaffey College Chino Community Center parking lot located at 5890 College Park Avenue from 4 to 8 p.m. While this event will not be held in person per se, it will be conducted as a drive-in event where all participants can enjoy either from inside or just outside their vehicle. They can enjoy the cultural performances, special guest characters from around the world, crafts, and food trucks. Registration is required for this event and will open on March 8th. For all questions, please call our Community Services Department at 909-334-3258. And finally, please make sure you come out to the Derriere 5K Run and Walk this Saturday, March 6th, from 7:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. It's held at the corner of Central and College Park Avenues. To allow for social distancing, the starting line to the run walk is open from 7:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m., and all participants are encouraged to wear their favorite sports gear. Registration is $40 and includes a t-shirt and a finisher medal. Additionally, individuals may also register for a virtual 5K run and walk at the same registration rate. A shirt and finisher medal will also be sent to those folks selecting this option as well. For registration information, please visit www.chinouthmuseum.com or call 909-334-3270. Next on our agenda is public communication. This is the time and the place for the general public to address the council that do not appear elsewhere. We'd be happy to hear your concerns or comments, but we cannot take action on anything that's not on the agenda. Our first written request to speak is Mr. Craig Arnhart of Calvary Chapel, Chino Valley. He's going to lead us in an invocation, and I'd invite all those interested to please join.
Thank you so much for having us here. On behalf of Pastor David and all of us at Calvary Chapel, Chino Valley, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's pray. Father, I just thank you for this day. I thank you for the opportunity to be here. I do pray for this council. I pray, Father, that you would give them wisdom and understanding and how to deal with the times that we're going through. I ask, Lord, that you would also protect the police that are on the streets and working in the police department, but also the firemen and all the workers that are out there now. Father, I thank you, Lord, for the work that's being done on Riverside, and I ask, Lord, that you would just protect those that are working on it, Lord. And Father, that you would just bless this great city, Lord, and my city, and be with us now, Lord, in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Craig. Okay, those are the only written requests that I have to speak that are not on items on the agenda. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address the council on any item not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none. Angela, do we have any comments from the public? No. Okay. Next on our agenda is the consent calendar. Do any council members wish to have any items removed? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, a motion from Mayor Pro Tem Lucio,
I'll second the motion.
second from Councilman Flores. Angela, roll call vote, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Lucio,
Yes.
Councilmember Flores,
Yes.
Councilmember Comstock,
Yes.
Councilmember Hargrove,
Yes.
Mayor Ulloa.
Yes, the item passes unanimously. Under public hearings, item number 12, formation of the Improvement Area 9 and Community Facilities District 2003-3. This item is to conduct a public hearing regarding the formation of an Improvement Area number 9 in Community Facilities District number 2003-3 in the Preserve. Staff report this evening is going to be provided by Rob Burns, our Director of Finance, but first I'd like to declare the public hearing open. Rob?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. On January 19th, the City Council adopted a resolution of intention to form Community Facilities District 2003-3 Improvement Area 9, as well as set tonight's meeting for the public hearing. The establishment of this improvement area will allow the city to assess a facilities tax on the homes, providing for the infrastructure that was installed in the area, as well as a municipal services tax that provides for public safety services down in the preserve. Tonight's actions are to adopt the resolutions and the ordinance to finalize the formation process. It's recommended that the City Council adopt the proceedings as outlined by the mayor this evening. That concludes my report. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Rob. Any members of the council have questions of Mr. Burns? Mark Hargrove, do you have any questions?
No, I do not, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Do any members of the public wish to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, then we will close the public hearing. We're ready for a motion to approve resolution numbers 2021-014 and 2021-015. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Motion from Mayor Pro Tem Lucio,
I'll make the second, Mayor.
second from Councilwoman Comstock. Okay, the resolution, okay, we can go ahead and vote now. Angela, roll call vote?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem Lucio,
Yes.
Councilmember Comstock,
Yes.
Councilmember Flores,
Yes.
Councilmember Hargrove,
Yes.
Mayor Ulloa.
Yes. Okay, the resolution's just adopted, established improvement area number 9 in the Community Facilities District number 2003-3 and authorized the city to levy a special tax in the improvement area according to the adopted rate and method of apportionment to determine it necessary to incur bonded indebtedness, and we call for an election in the improvement area, which will now be held by our city clerk. Angela?
Thank you, Mayor. All ballots have been cast in connection with the election for improvement area number 9 of CFD number 2003-3 of the city of Chino, and the election has now been closed. The results of the election were unanimous. 59 votes in favor of the propositions.
Okay, thank you. Having heard the city clerk's statement, I will now entertain a motion to adopt resolution number 2021-016, certifying the results of the election.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Lucio makes the motion. Second.
I'll make the second.
Councilman Flores makes the second. Okay, before the vote is taken, I would like to, right? I'd like to
Correct.
ask our attorney to read the ordinance.
Mayor, may I
Let's get it wrong.
cast, this is the vote for the resolution, so we'll take a vote on that first, and then
Oh, I
we'll-
can do that first. Okay. Then, Angela, roll call vote.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem Lucio,
Yes.
Councilmember Flores,
Yes.
Councilmember Comstock,
Yes.
Councilmember Hargrove,
Yes.
Mayor Ulloa.
Yes. Okay, now, with the election complete, I'll now entertain another motion, this time to approve the introduction of ordinance number 2021-003, authorizing a levy of a special tax within improvement number 9. I'd like to call for a motion in a second.
I'll make the motion, Mayor. Thank you.
Motion from Councilwoman Comstock,
I'll second.
second from Mayor Pro Tem Lucio. Now, Fred, would you like to read the ordinance?
Thank you. Technically, those motions could have been joined together, but this works as well. With that, the council is considering introduction of the following ordinance, which I'll read by title only. Ordinance number 2021-003, entitled An Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Chino, California, acting in its capacity as the legislative body of Community Facilities District number 2003-3 of the City of Chino on behalf of Improvement Area number 9 therein, authorizing the levy of a special tax within Improvement Area number 9 of the district. Thank you. That concludes the reading of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Angela, would you please call roll call?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Comstock,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lucio,
Yes.
Councilmember Flores,
Yes.
Councilmember Hargrove,
Yes.
Mayor Ulloa.
Yes. So this concludes this public hearing. We'll now close the public hearing. Totally. Okay, next on the agenda is under new business. This is going to be a joint session of the City Council and the Chino Public Financing Authority. So, Madam Chair Comstock, would you please call the Chino Public Financing Authority to order?
Yes, Mayor. I would like to call the Chino Public Financing Authority to order and open.
Okay, item number 13 is refunding of Community Facilities District bonds, adoption of resolutions authorizing the issuance of special tax refunding bonds and their corresponding Chino Public Financing Authority resolutions, approving the substantially final forms of the indenture of trust, preliminary official statement, bond purchase agreement, and continuing disclosure statement for the 2021 refunding bonds. I'd like to ask for a staff report once again from Rob Burns, our Director of Finance.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. Tonight, we're seeking approval for the bond documents relating to refunding 6 of our CFDs. Interestingly enough, the board approved this refunding in November of 2019. However, shortly thereafter, the market kind of turned against us and we weren't able to successfully issue the bonds at substantial savings. So we're here to do it again. Currently, we anticipate about $2 million of savings between the 6 CFDs. These savings will flow down to the property owners within these CFDs, and so we are excited about that. I would like to point out that we are issuing taxable bonds. Normally, local agencies issue tax-exempt bonds, but because of some law changes in 2017, where we stand right now, we have to issue taxable bonds. So the interest rate's a little higher. However, we still are going to experience some substantial savings. But I do want to note that there is some effort at the federal level to change the tax law that might allow us to issue these as tax-exempt bonds. So we do want to get your authorization also to, if this should change in the next few weeks, that we would hold off until the legislation is passed, and we would then issue the tax-exempt bonds, because that would almost double our savings. But as the market goes up and down, we want to try to capture what's available right now, so we don't want to wait too long. We want to take advantage of what we can right now.
When
So
do
with that,
when do you expect that to happen?
Well, we don't know. We're monitoring it closely. There is, we do have a contact at our bond attorney's office. They're actually on the committee to change the legislation to allow for advance refundings to be tax exempt. They are drafting the legislation, but they don't know when, the legislature may take it up for a vote. So it could be soon, it could be later, we really don't know. But we know it's in the works, but the thing is, if we wait too long, the market could turn against us again, and we might potentially lose the opportunity to refund these bonds. So we're gonna monitor it closely, and then we'll make the best informed decision as we can. That concludes my report, and I'm available for any questions.
Okay, any council members have questions of Rob? Councilman Hargrove, do you have any questions?
No, Mayor.
Okay, is there anyone in the public that has any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, then I would entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Motion from Mayor Pro Tem Lucio,
I'll make the second, Mayor.
second from Councilwoman Comstock. Angela, would you please call roll call vote?
Mayor Pro Tem Lucio,
Yes.
Councilmember Comstock,
Yes.
Councilmember Flores,
Yes.
Councilmember Hargrove,
Yes.
Mayor Ulloa.
Yes. Okay, the item passes unanimously. Karen, would you like to adjourn the Financing Authority?
Yes, Mayor, this adjourns the Chino Public Financing Authority session.
Thank you. Now, under new business, item number 14, award professional services agreement for design of the State Street Water Treatment Plant, WA 212. This is to appropriate and award a professional services agreement to Hazen and Sawyer in the amount not to exceed $1,697,244 for engineering and design services for the State Street Water Treatment Plant project. Our staff report this evening will be provided by Amanda Corker, our principal engineer.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. This evening, I have for your consideration award of a design contract for the State Street Water Treatment Plant to Hazen and Sawyer in the amount of $1,697,244 plus a 10% contingency. The State Street Water Treatment Plant is a master planned facility which will allow the city to produce its groundwater rights by bringing stranded assets back into service, and will lower our reliance on imported water, which I discussed in detail during my presentation back on January 19th. The city received one proposal in response to the solicitation. However, the cost is comparable to similar design work previously completed, and Hazen and Sawyer has proven to have the technical expertise necessary for this type of work. In closing, staff recommend the award of contract to Hazen and Sawyer, along with the additional recommendations in the staff report. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Amanda. Now, this is for design only. When do you anticipate construction starting and finishing?
So we're hoping to complete design in about a year, and then we'll go out to bid the project for construction.
Any idea how long it will take?
Construction will probably be about a year and a half, probably similar to our Eastside Water Treatment Facility. Maybe a bit longer than that, but around that time frame.
Okay, it's a ways off. Okay, any questions of Amanda this evening? No. Councilman Hargrove, any questions?
No, no questions. Thank you.
Okay, then I would entertain a motion and a second.
There's a question in the audience, Mayor.
Oh, yes, Stubby.
Forgot the peanut gallery. I just have a couple of comments. One is, because this will pertain to the design, I saw the option for the Central and Mission route versus the Phillips and Benson route. Construction on Mission and Central is going to be about 4 times the cost of building it on Benson and then on the south half of Phillips, which we already own. I would just like to suggest that. And also, that's not the world's safest area. I think security should be considered in the design. I don't know if you're familiar with where this is. It's in the State Street rail yard. Thank you.
Thank you, Stubby. We'll note your comments for the record. Anyone else have any comments this evening? Okay, seeing none, then I would entertain a motion in a second.
I'll make the motion.
Mayor Pro Tem Lucio makes the motion,
I'll make the second, Mayor.
and Councilwoman Comstock makes the second. Angela, roll call vote, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Lucio?
Yes.
Councilmember Comstock?
Yes.
Councilmember Flores?
Yes.
Councilmember Hargrove?
Yes.
Mayor Ulloa?
Yes, item passes unanimously. Okay, item number 15, status update on the 2021-2029 housing element. This item is to receive a report from the city's housing element consultant on the status of the housing element update. Staff report this evening will be provided by Nick Ligoria, our Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Tonight, we are bringing an update to the council on the progress of the housing element. And one of the large components of the housing element is the sites inventory. And so when we last discussed with council at the beginning of the year that we were going to bring in a draft sites inventory for the council to look at after our Housing Element Steering Committee had provided comments and suggestions. And so that's going to be the focus of our consultant's report tonight. Understanding that this is very much a draft. It's in the very initial stages. This is in a sense, the consultant will get into it, but it's kind of a technical compliance where we look at all of the state criteria, which our consultant will explain a little bit more in depth. We kind of throw all the properties in the basket that meet that criteria, and then we go out to the policymakers and the community to say, okay, is there anything that's good? Is there anything that's bad? And so this is a very initial step in that whole process that we will be going through in the next several months. So with that, I'm going to introduce Nick Chen with Kimberly Horn and Associates. That is our primary consultant.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of City Council. My name is Nick Chen. I'm with Kimberly Horn, as Nick pointed out, and I'll be giving the presentation tonight. So quick agenda. We'll be going just a quick overview. I believe I was last here just about a month ago giving a City Council study session update as well on the intro to the housing element. We covered a number of topics on the housing element update process and sort of the workings of the whole update. I'll also be going through some community outreach efforts, as well as our continuing efforts with the steering committee. And then lastly, we'll go take a look at the draft sites analysis strategy. As Nick pointed out, there are a number of components, many mandated by state law, that determine not only how many sites the city will plan for, but also the size and some of the characteristics of those sites and where those units can be placed. So our goal tonight is to provide an overview of that process, take a look at some initial analysis, and get comments and questions from there. So a little bit on the status update right now. I mentioned there's 4 major components of the housing element update. The introduction, the community profile, which is a demographic background, the constraints and resources, which contains the sites analysis, and then lastly, the housing plan, which is the plan and policies that go into the housing element document. To date, draft sections of the introduction and the community profile have been completed, as well as a review of past performance. This is a review of how the city did on their 5th cycle in terms of analyzing the programs within the 5th cycle and the city's ability to complete them. In progress right now is that housing constraints and resources. That's why we're here with you tonight. A major part of that being the sites analysis process that we are in essence sort of kicking off tonight with you. And then the housing plan and policies as well. So a little bit on community outreach. As you all may remember, we held a virtual community workshop. It was a narrated video presentation that is actually still up on the city's housing element website for anyone who would like to view, get an understanding of the housing element update process. We plan to leave that and all the other relevant information up for the duration of the process. We went through a housing element update process, the required components of a housing element update, and also the anticipated project timeline. We also conducted a community survey. There were 129 responses. This survey looked at a number of topics ranging from inputs into types of housing, broad level looks at potential areas for housing, broken down into a couple categories, as well as some initial policies and program information to look at what some potential opportunities in the community may be. A few results from that survey. You'll note on the left there was a ranking of priority ranking for housing areas. Actually, the way this reads is that the highest priority was ranked number 1, so the lowest number is in essence the highest ranked item. So you can see new housing communities, such as College Park and the Preserve, were at the top of the list. Existing neighborhoods, older commercial centers, regional shopping centers, accessory dwelling units, and towards the bottom, Civic Center downtown and commercial corridors. Some of those have a little bit of overlap, but it does give us a good idea of just part of our analysis. Again, a number of these things go into our analysis and how we take a look at what we eventually bring forward to you as decision makers to ultimately look at. On the right, you'll see affordable housing program opportunities. These are ranked essentially 1 through 5. So where you see 5, that was folks who voted this the highest priority versus 1. You can see it's a bit of an interesting tale. If you look at the data, inclusionary housing got both the highest for number 1 and a very high number 5 rating. So people either were very on board or very sort of against inclusionary housing. Accessory dwelling units was very high on the low category. So it's an interesting data point there as well. Mixed use opportunities did fairly well, but largely keeping affordable housing, or essentially the keeping of existing affordable housing units in the community through either rehabilitation or establishing ways to keep existing units was the highest. I will note that that option, while it's important to look at as part of the housing element update, does not create new units in the essence that it can establish new units for meeting the city's regional housing needs assessment, but it is an important policy that the state looks at for keeping existing, essentially rehabilitating units that may be at risk of converting to market rate. So we do also have a housing element steering committee. They have met twice, once on January 14th and another time on February 11th. They are scheduled to meet again coming next week, I believe next Thursday. And that steering committee just helps to vet some of the information and analysis that we go through, provide another set of eyes to both the city and us as a consultant team to get a first look at essentially what we have been looking at as part of our analysis and provide their very initial thoughts on that. You can see essentially in the February meeting, we discussed the sites analysis and took a broad level view at some of the sites areas and got comments on whether we were headed in the right direction. Potential areas need to come off. I believe the staff report contains some of their comments. There were revisions made based on the comments that we received. Just as we go throughout this entire process, there will continue to be revisions made, until ultimately you as a decision-making body come to a decision on the sites. So a little bit about the sites analysis strategy. Before we jump in too much, I want to make a quick note. So the city's RENA allocation and the regional housing needs assessment allocation is actually 6,978. Maybe just a tick higher than you remember. It's because there were 2 successful RENA appeals as part of the SCAG RENA appeal process. They were largely based on mathematical errors that were found. And so every jurisdiction in the SCAG region essentially received a proportionate bump up. It resulted, I believe, in 15 extra units, if I remember correctly. This is essentially the final. SCAG will adopt this in the coming days. So a little bit of the site selection methodology. Housing element sites, per state law, need to meet a certain number of criteria, most of which is the reasonable assumption that they are likely to redevelop within the planning period or over the next 8 years. The sites that are viewed as most likely to redevelop are vacant parcels because they have no existing uses that might present some sort of impediment to future development. That could include leases, it could include existing structures that would have to be demolished. So vacant sites are seen as the highest priority in terms of the ranking. It doesn't always mean that vacant sites will make it in. It's just one part of the criteria that's required by state law. There are also requirements of state law that say you need to try your best to meet at least half of your lower income need on half of your lower income need on vacant sites, because the state views that as no longer presenting an impediment essentially to development of housing because you have enough of the sites on these vacant parcels. If the city can't do that, the city conducts an additional analysis that looks at non-vacant parcels and the city's history of developing those non-vacant parcels and how successful they've been at that, and kind of compares that and projects that analysis across. So it is certainly possible to select non-vacant sites. There are plenty of them in the city that we'll be taking a look at. It is just an additional process if you go that route. So underutilized parcels are another group of parcels that we look at. We look at areas where potentially uses are either older and have not been rehabilitated, not been renovated in a while. We look at shopping centers where maybe due to COVID or other factors, leases, there may be some vacancies in there and there may be some potential to redevelop. We look at large parking lots because there are market trends all over the SCAG region showing that large parking lots and surface parking in areas where it's permitted are changing over to more of a mixed-use type setting. So that is an option. And we also look at existing commercial properties with mixed-use potential. So tonight, the strategy we want to walk through that we've sort of been drafting is a combination of a lot of those. So one is a proposed rezoning to R30 essentially. Another is to look at a mixed-use overlay. Third is to look at accessory dwelling unit capacity within the city, or the assumptions we can make. And lastly is existing capacity within specific areas like the Preserve and College Park. So all of these have been included. And I'll go into a little detail now about why I mentioned R30, which would be a residential designation that allowed 30 dwelling units an acre. So because of where Chino sits in the overall region and the population of Chino and the size, HCD has deemed that their default density is 30 dwelling units an acre. So what that default density means is that if the city identifies development that can occur at 30 dwelling units an acre, the state will not view it as an impediment to the development of lower income housing. So essentially, it will not be the sites will not be challenged. There will still need to be plenty of assumptions made on those sites, and the sites that are chosen ultimately will have a analysis done on a parcel by parcel basis. But that is the default density of the city or the state identifies for Chino, and it essentially is a default density for most cities within the SCAG region, unless your population is below, I believe, I want to say 15 or 20,000. If you're a very small city, then essentially you could get 20 DU an acre, but most are at 30 dwelling units an acre. So because the city doesn't currently have a residential zone that allows 30 dwelling units per acre, one strategy would be to create a new zone and identify parcels that would be rezoned to that. The other is to create a mixed-use zone that would essentially overlay on top of the existing zoning and permit that development of that density. So those are two of the main strategies that we talked about, or I'll be talking about in just a little bit. So the first is the rezone strategy. As I mentioned, this changes the zoning of a parcel from whatever the existing zoning is to this new residential at 30 dwelling units an acre. The benefit of this is that it essentially requires us or allows us to assume a higher yield on those parcels than we'd be able to assume otherwise, as the zoning now allows more units than would typically be developed. Another typical development in this range can include townhomes and apartments, typically 3 to 4 stories in height, but it really does depend on the site design, the development. There are plenty of products that are able to achieve this density at lower heights and some that go higher. It just depends on the design of each individual project. As I mentioned, the overlay preserves the existing zoning. So if a commercial zoning is underneath, the overlay allows that commercial zoning to stay, and the property owner can still do fully commercial uses. Because the property owner can still do fully commercial uses, the housing element has to make assumptions that some property owners will choose to do that. So essentially, when for analysis purposes, we have to assume a lower yield towards median the arena on these mixed-use sites. So in effect, what that means is we have to identify more sites within the city. There are pluses and minuses, pushing and pulling. This is all part of what we want to get your feedback on tonight. And so essentially what would happen is you would overlay that zone to allow residential at 30 units an acre in addition to the existing uses, and there would be standards set in place to how the structure of that would look. And that would be established as a program in the housing element. The city would then have 3 years from the adoption of the housing element to be able to implement that rezoning program. We did talk about accessory dwelling units as well. This is another strategy available to the city. SCAG and HGD essentially look at, sorry, I apologize. For everybody, when I say SCAG, I mean the Southern California Association of Governments, and when I say HGD, I mean the State Department of Housing and Community Development. They essentially look at the city's past performance, as well as 2018, 2019, and 2020 legislation promoting the development of accessory dwelling units in areas where accessory dwelling units couldn't previously be put, and also may reduce some setbacks and essentially remove constraints to building ADUs. So because of that, the state assumes that in our analysis we can assume some sort of growth on the past performance. So the housing element does make an assumption on certain percentage of the past performance and then growth year after year from there over the 8-year cycle. And there's a methodology that SCAG has established to look at the affordability levels of those and be able to determine what those may be. And it's actually a fairly generous one, skewing heavily towards the lower income need. I believe I believe it's somewhere in the realm of 65% of the units may be assumed to meet the city's very low and low income need. So the accessory dwelling units are generally smaller units. They can be detached, attached, garage conversions. It can be a number of different configurations, and they are separate units that can be leased out on typically a single family property, although new state law has allowed them on multifamily properties as well. So additional sites considerations, 2 things we want to mention. While not on the map that was provided to you, there is an assumption of units within the specific plan areas within the community, so the Preserve and College Park. Those sites essentially are entitled units. We know the plan as it stands now for the number of units to be built over the next, basically the duration of the rest of the entitlements and how long that lasts. So we can make assumptions on those based on the densities of those as to how they may go. The strategy that we looked at based on the densities, because there are very few areas that meet that 30 dwelling unit per acre threshold, is to have this essentially meet the city's entire moderate and above moderate need and focus on the rezoning for the lower need, which essentially would get through the rest of the sites the city would need to look at. Additionally, I think we've talked about this, but it's a good point to reiterate, the city cannot identify sites within the sphere of influence currently. If somehow in the next 6 months or so properties are discussed, then the city can talk with the county about how to essentially handle those individual properties, but there is not, the city cannot take credit for arena sites that are in the sphere of influence currently and not within the city. So provided to you was the sites review map. I won't go page by page, but there are several slides here that look at this map. It's very important to note that this map is essentially the first pass to be able to provide you with something to give feedback on. We found that's the best strategy, is to present something rather than hand a blank map and ask you to do our job. We make sure that we do our job and give you something to provide feedback on. What you see here is in excess of the city's current need by, I believe, a certain, I want to say 30 to 40%, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but so there is a good amount of room to come down. The city does need to maintain some sort of buffer, typically 10 to 15% on the lower income need to help the city avoid potential no net loss issues. No net loss is another state law where the state can essentially come in through Assembly Bill, I believe it's 67, don't quote me on it, and have enforcement measures where through the city's annual progress report, they will look at proportional development and how the city is doing essentially in meeting their need. So the state has the ability to kind of check in on every city to make sure that they're still doing what they said they would do in the housing element. So there's a number of state laws that dictate how these sites were chosen. AB 1397 as well has a size provision that talks about identifying sites that are greater than half an acre but less than 10 acres for the typical difficulty in developing those types of sites for 30 dwelling units an acre at those densities. So with that, my presentation is essentially over. I'll go over next steps. But as I mentioned, we do have some of these available if you'd like to discuss them. And I'll just touch on next steps real quickly. We want to really get your feedback on the site strategy tonight and make sure that we're headed in the right direction. We will have essentially review and analysis done by the Planning Commissions and City Council. We will also have, in preparation of a public review draft, a document that will go out to the public. That is still very much a draft document at that point. We take that feedback, ultimately take all feedback we get up to that point into consideration for the document that will go to HCD for consideration for certification. And with that, I end my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Before I call on the public, I'd like to ask first if council member have any questions of Nick before we get into general discussion.
I do.
Yes.
So I looked at the biggest area that you have identified, which is R30, and it's going to be just south of College Park, which is really prison land. How can we account for this large parcel and take that into consideration as an area that we can develop when it's owned by the state? And if you look at it, you're actually going almost halfway into their east facility, jail facility. How is it that we can identify that area when it's an active prison and it's also land that we don't own?
Yeah, so there has been, city staff, there has been discussion with the state to potentially have the state kind of contribute and do their part to look at some land. If you look at that parcel, that is, as you mentioned, a very large parcel. It's identified that way because we have to identify the entire parcel by accessor parcel number. That just happens to be the shape of it. We've actually only made an assumption of about a little bit less than 10 acres because of that AB 1397 provision at 25 dwelling units an acre. So if you see on that parcel, there is, I believe it's just about 9.85 acres and about 248 units. So it's a much smaller portion than it looks like on the map. We just are required to identify the entire parcel because that's essentially the assessor parcel number that it covers.
So you're only going to take basically the front part facing Euclid.
Yeah, I don't think there's been any decisions made on which portion it would be, but you're correct. It would be, avoid any existing uses, obviously, and would be in coordination with the state. And again, this is a sample parcel because it's one of the options we wanted to put before you.
But there's nothing with the state currently that the state says we're willing to do this land.
Sorry, I didn't catch the last
There's
part.
nothing as far as communication with the state where the state has said at this point that they're willing to give up any of their land at this point.
I would have to defer to Nick and to Warren on that.
What I'll state is that the state of California has identified that parcel as surplus.
Okay.
So with the state, they've identified that.
So there's some talk that they're willing to give that portion up.
Correct.
Now, is that the whole parcel or just the 9 acres?
No, so there's going to have to be several things that'll come into play. Certainly, there's buffers around that facility itself. You can see why College Park kind of is indented there. It's because they had to. There's a requirement as far as a buffer between any other use and the facility. So that'll cut a large portion of that parcel down. But the state did not get into the specific details. They're also going to have to provide space for parks and other amenities within that parcel, not just the housing itself. But again, early on, the state of California had, right when Newsom took office, he identified sites, and they identified this site as a potential housing location. We did go up and meet with the governor's staff to talk about, and the Department of General Services, who is actually surplusing the property. And there wasn't much interest immediately. They wanted a quick turnaround as far as building housing. We explained to them what, if they were to entertain that we would like to plan that entire parcel. And because of that, we were lower on the list as far as actually them moving forward with surplusing it. But they have, if you were to go to the state's website, Department of General Services, that specific parcel is listed.
And do you know exactly what the buffer is going to be between, or what currently the buffer is between a facility and housing?
I believe it's about 150 feet. What, Nick, do you know?
The current buffer is 1/8 of a mile, or 660 feet. The state Department of General Services has designated 70 acres of this parcel as the potential surplus. So it would essentially, before the indent starts, if you will, on the map, if you drew a line south, that would essentially be the boundaries. So they're looking at 70 acres from Euclid in, and essentially respecting the existing 660-foot buffer from the facility.
Okay.
I have a question for Mr. Chen.
Yes, Karen.
Sir, you stated that this parcel had to be identified by this area by the parcel, which is why it goes into the prison. Is the same to be assumed for all the rest of the parcels as well? So there's other portions of these parcels that are, potentially not developable, but we had to identify them by the parcel number.
That is correct. There's a few parcels that have existing power easement lines through them that we would need to net out that acreage. So again, the very early analysis of identifying the entire parcel, but you're absolutely correct.
Also, another one that I'm looking at, if you look at the one that says 218, 117, it looks like that is currently a church, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, Victory Outreach.
No, it's not Victory Outreach. It's
Where's it located?
It's right on the corner of Edison and, was it Fern? It's Cross Point Church, but it looks like it's zoned for potential housing, and then I believe the parcel that's empty is something that they're looking at developing for a community center.
Oh.
So
I mean, have we had discussions with these people are they looking at moving, or are we just randomly picking just spots?
So in some instances, there have been discussions. I don't know that parcel specifically, but another trend that we've seen happening in a lot of areas is that our church is wanting to use parts of their property for the development of housing. I don't know if that's specifically the case for them. We would have to have those discussions, but we didn't want to rule it out at this point. We want to make sure that we have the largest, essentially, universe of sites we can, and then begin to whittle down from there.
So many, because I have a lot of objections on this map, but right now I won't go into details. So many of the sites where there's the dark blue color, you don't know for sure whether those housing units can even be built on those parcels, correct? You just identified areas throughout the city that might be potential?
We know that based on the size of the property and based on some of the constraints that we can see and the area that is located, that it may make a good potential site, but we don't know for sure that housing, in a lot of cases currently because of the zoning, housing may not be able to be developed. This would have to include the rezone strategy or the mixed-use strategy that we talked about to be able to develop those units.
So the community outreach really had nothing to do with contacting these parcels. Like Councilman Lucio just said, it looks like one of the areas is actually Cross Point Church. Well, that church isn't going to go anywhere. You've got the mark all over the place, covering it, but it's not really a potential site. So these landowners weren't actually contacted yet.
No, so that does come later on in the process, and essentially the discussions on the assumptions that we could make once we have that. If they say there's no way that we would develop on this parcel, we would remove it. If they say we'd be interested in potentially developing part of it, we would make an assumption based on part of it. But again, we did have to identify the entire parcel because of the accessory parcel number as an initial glance at it. But those are again, long process, very beginning of it, and parts of the discussions that we'll need to have.
There are some parcels that are not indicated as being potential sites. I'm assuming there were reasons why they were not identified?
Yes, there could be a number of different reasons. Proximity to transit, it could be adjacent uses, whether they be single family. We had identified some more additional parcels for different reasons. In the staff report, the steering committee mentioned may not be suitable parcels, so we happen to take those out. But we are very open to adding parcels back in per the strategy that we outlined, and no site at this point is off the table.
Okay, I'm going to hold the rest of my comments right now. Are there any other comments or questions from council members?
Yeah, I have a question. Just for Site 129, I see that there's a consideration for Site 129 to be removed. Why is that a consideration?
Sorry, apologize 1 second. Let me look at which one site 129 was.
Chris, where's 129?
That's on Pipeline and Riverside. It's on the far left on the map.
Go ahead and bring in, well, I guess here, I'll pull up my map. I believe, yeah. Yeah, so the steering committee, due to the adjacency to the large lot single family directly south of it, that was the reason for that recommendation. It was initially considered as a parcel because it was a commercial center that may have the opportunity to provide housing, but that was the reasoning for the removal of it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and, if there's no more questions from council, Councilman Hargrove, do you have any questions before I go to the public comments? Councilman Hargrove? Apparently not. I'm going to go ahead and go to public comments right now before we wrap up council comments. First written request to speak is Larry Walker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. You have us at a bit of a disadvantage out here because we don't have the documentation that you have before you, so it's a little hard to follow all the locations that you've been discussing. And clearly this is at a pretty early stage in the, at least in the knowledge process. I can't tell if it's at an early stage regarding the requirement to get it back to the state process, so there could be some conflict there. But I would just offer, in addition to the obvious point that you've all made about the fact that there is a lot more thinking and communicating that needs to be done about this, three points, if I may. I saw the 30 unit per acre density being proposed, and then the overlay is suggested as an alternative in a commercial area. My suggestion would be that I would be hesitant, I would advise being hesitant about putting a 30 unit per acre density into the city's general plan with the potential that it could be used by anyone to build 30 units per acre. And then it goes a different direction than affordable housing for some reason that we can't anticipate today. And the question is whether that's still a tool for affordable housing or not. I would suggest that the overlay be used for anything that's going to involve affordable housing, so that the overlay process that you can design in terms of around some sort of conditional use permit would actually put all the pieces together, the affordability, the enforceability of the affordability, the financing, which is it's hard to see it coming from the private sector, so somewhere the government's going to have to be involved in financing these things. And when the package comes together, then the increase in density is part of that package. I would suggest that that's the best way to approach the density issue, and not to lay some designation on some property that says you've got 30 units per acre now, and see what people show up with. The point has been made to me, and I'm not sure what else is involved, but one location that I came to address specifically tonight, and I was interested because the reference has been made to community surveys. Well, we did a community survey back in July of 2017 about whether a large amount of 1 unit per acre property in the north part of town should be rezoned through the Measure M process. And the voters, the policy of the voters of the city of Chino, as they expressed it in the polling place, was that something like 74% of those voting said, no, you should not change it. We do not want to see that reduced. Now, some of the property you've got on these maps tonight is technically not a part of that proposed development, but I think it's pretty much everything else in that North Chino area that was involved that wasn't in that development. And so I would encourage that list that's been referred to of things where people have taken them off because they don't make sense, that would be a good place to put this particular location. And frankly, I have a nagging feeling there might be a couple of other locations that I would agree with you if you put them in that list too, but I haven't had a chance to see the list, so I am unable to comment further. And I think I'll leave it at that. You've got a big task ahead of you. It seems this RHNA thing comes up every time somebody wants to increase density throughout the city for just about any reason. Affordability is always talked about. And yet here, 30, 40, 50 years later, we look back at all the affordable housing that's been talked about, and it's hard to identify anything that remains available to people who need affordable housing and hasn't moved already to the free market and moving up with everything else. So if there's going to be affordable housing in this community, I would suggest that some effort be made to create a mechanism whereby it remains affordable from generation to generation, as opposed to just simply being a one-time windfall for one particular lucky person. And frankly, I will try to make that March 11th meeting. This is getting interesting, and I have argued many times that it's unfair to use RHNA as a wedge to try to force increases in density, but it is an issue the city needs to address, and so I feel some obligation to work on the positive side of that as well. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next written request to speak is Donna Marchese.
Hi, I'm Donna Marchese, and I came specifically to talk about the Philadelphia and Benson project, but as I'm thinking about other areas on the map and stuff, I'm wondering how many other areas are going to be like that property, which is Ontario and Chino. If it gets developed, is Ontario going to develop the street along with Chino, or is it going to be a mishmash mess? And then you've got the county up above. You need to consider that, because over my neck of the woods, the county isn't improving the roads, so people are coming down the side roads to get away from bad thoroughfares like Ramona. That's something to think about as you're annexing in these. You make a nice little thing here, but to get to it is bad. I was in a bad accident in November coming down Monte Vista, and the lady that came out to see why the back end of my car was blowing through her block wall told me ever since they started putting more lights in on Central, the city of Chino, they're getting more and more traffic and more accidents, because people are going to avoid the big streets with all the lights or the streets with the problems like Ramona. So that's something to think about when you annex in these little parts for this, and you put a lot of people trying to get there down county roads that aren't improved. And another thing to think about, I don't know if any of you guys are on Nextdoor. One of the big chatters right now is the post office is starting to hand out notices to people. We're not going to deliver your mail if you don't get the cars out from in front of the mailboxes. We have the right to do it. Houses have too many people with too many cars. And then talking to a friend who lives on Russell and Riverside, the apartments over by Stater Brothers have too many people with too many cars, so they're blocking all the streets around them. They can't get their mail. They can't put their trash cans out. They can't get a street sweeper. So that's another thing to think about when you start packing people in, because everybody assumes so many cars, so many parking spaces. Mm-hmm. Well, you know, people are going to pack people into units, and they're going to have more cars than you plan on. When I did the census, one of the best places I did the census in Ontario was the Paseos. It's over on 4th by Archibald. They have parking. It's all underground, all above, the houses above the parking. A lot of parking. When I went to the other apartment complexes on, say, 4th and Haven and on Haven, they had parking spots. You couldn't find an extra spot. During COVID, it was loaded. Service people, we're circling around trying to find parking. You need to make sure you get ample parking when you start packing people in like crazy, because you know they're going to put extra people in. So that was it. The parking issues, the mail issues, too many people packed into too tight a spot. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Anyone else in the audience who would like to address the council on item number 15? Yes, sir.
My name is Larry Dalma. I live here in Chino. I have a question for Mr. Chen, is it?
You're talking about building R30. I'd like to mention what she did about parking. Where are you going to put 60 cars on 1 acre?
Larry, you can't address him, you have to address
Okay.
us.
Where are you going to put 60 cars on 1 acre?
It's a good question.
If you build R30, that means there's 30 units, and each unit's going to have at least 2 cars. I mean, I walk around north area Chino over there, and even the R4 has 4 and 5 cars per house. So, and the new thing that D.R. Horton built up there on Francis and Central, they're parked bumper to bumper. If you walk through there, everybody's car is dinged on the bumpers because they are literally parked bumper to bumper. There is no parking. And when you build R30, that's going to be at least 60 cars per acre. I don't think you can even park 60 cars on an acre.
No, I understand. Thank you very much. Anyone else in the audience have comments? Yes, Stubby.
Thank you. A couple of comments and also one question. This is an allocation only, but it is mandated, so we don't really have a choice. But keep in mind that to do R30 in the current market, you're talking about mid-rise construction. You're talking about 4 or 5-story buildings at the minimum. And to do that in affordable housing, it's going to have to be heavily subsidized. So just keep that in mind. My question is follow up on Mr. Lucio's area. On the draft plan, we have several completely unbuildable areas that are zoned R30, specifically like in the substation transmission overlays, just north of the church. Those lots are literally unbuildable. Is that legal for us to even put those in the allocation?
Well, no, and that's one of the issues. This plan has to be gone over very thoroughly. That's why I made the point, there's areas that are designated, but it really hasn't been vetted.
Right, and those are extremely large areas. They're vacant, but they're vacant because you can't build there, period.
Right.
So I think the map needs to be accurate.
It's a first draft.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, I'll return it to the council then. Any other comments from council members? Chris, do you have any final comments? Mark? Karen?
Yes, Mayor, I have a lot of comments about this map. During my campaign for city council, I met with a lot of people and spoke with them about their concerns about housing and the general plan. And I spoke quite candidly with them about some of the state mandates that were coming our way. And I as well, like everybody else, Mayor, have a lot of concerns about this map. It's nice to hear tonight it's the first draft, but I want to explain to people that I took those comments and conversations with people very seriously. I understand the frustration with some of the mandates that are coming to us from the state. You look at some of these parcels that have been identified, and I agree with some of the comments that have been made here tonight where there's already been some heavy weigh-in from some of our residents about some of the locations that have been identified for this development. So I know that we have a lot of work to do with this with staff. I also look at some of the other locations, and maybe for some reason they weren't identified by Mr. Chen's firm, but I think there's other locations we could consider, for this map in the future. But this is a problem for us, and we got some very, very difficult decisions to make. But I do want to convey to people that I think, as much as possible, I want to, especially where people have already spoken out, adhere to our general plan. And preserve some of the quality of life that we have talked about, our residents have talked about in Chino. Now, do we have areas that potentially we could identify some of this? That's the first time tonight I've actually heard Mr. Walker say, hey, this is getting very serious and we need to sit down and work through some of this, potentially so. And I think we do have an obligation to do that. But this is going to be an arduous task to identify these sites. I'm happy to hear that the state is willing to maybe meet us halfway, but there's also probably concern to some of the residents that live in that area, with considering that location. So I just want to work with the community. I want to work with staff, and I want to make sure that that we deliver on some, quite frankly, some I would say expectations from our community to maintain the quality of life that we enjoy in Chino. The one thing I do like about this is there are some areas where we may want to, moving forward, consider some mixed use in some of our commercial areas. It may be time for us to start considering that. I think it would be helpful to revitalizing some of our shopping centers, but that's a question for us to have to explore. But I also am concerned about the comments that were made here tonight about taking these zoning areas, turning them into free market opportunities, and of course, as Mr. Barr said tonight, we would have to really seriously consider these, a lot of this high-density housing as subsidized if we're going to keep it that way for generations to come. I'm sorry, Mayor, if my comments were too windy.
No, that's okay. This is very serious, and this is going to have a very, very major impact on our community. I will admit, in going over the map and looking at this, I was pretty upset. In fact, very upset. Talked to Nick and to Matt and unloaded a bit about my concerns. Obviously, parcels were selected and just designated RD30 without further consideration. One example is we're going to be going through a master plan for our civic center. And the property across the street is one of the large areas that was designated RD30. We need that land for our civic center. That will not be RD30. It can't be because we don't have any availability of other land to build a civic center on. Mr. Walker brought up Measure H that was unanimously passed in July 2017, where the citizens objected to changing RD1 to approximately RD30. It's overwhelmingly defeated, and yet this plan has some of that land. Some of it actually was part of Measure H, and some of it is adjacent to it, has it designated RD30. Citizens have very, very loudly spoken against that, and we have to respect that. We have a Parks Master Plan that we have yet to work on. And one very large parcel, if we don't annex the sphere of influence, there's only one large parcel that's left in the north area that could potentially be a park, and that's on the corner of Central and Francis, and yet that whole piece of property is designated RD30. So there's much more to be considered than just meeting the state's mandates, much more to be considered. So when I was talking to Matt and Nick, I said, I think we need to have a council workshop ASAP, where we can roll up our sleeves and look at these numbers and see how things can be moved around. I, for one, am getting really tired of the state dictating to us. They don't answer to these people. We do. We live here. They don't. They throw numbers at us and demand that we meet their numbers with absolutely no consideration of quality of life or cohesiveness of neighborhoods. They don't care. They just want their numbers met. We're already seeing parking problems in the preserve where we've had to build some pretty intense development. Neighbors fighting neighbors because they don't have a place to park their cars. RD30 to me, and we do have some land designated RD30, and it has not been built because it's not economically feasible. So the state seems to think if you designate RD30, it's automatically going to be low income. The comment was made it's going to have to be heavily subsidized, and it absolutely is, and that money is not available, and we don't have it. So how these units are going to be built and be low income, low and moderate income, and remain so is a mystery to me, especially when what the point was made by Stubby, probably, and by Larry, probably 2 cars at least per unit. That's 60 cars on 1 acre of land. I live on an acre of land. How do you put 30 units and 60 cars on 1 acre of land? It's just, you've got to go 3 and 4 stories. We don't even allow 4 stories in our community right now. We can go 3 stories, but not 4. So there's a lot of thought that has to go into this. I don't know. This state's just, their mandates are ridiculous. Nick, I have a question for you. When we used to give bonus densities for low and moderate income, the builders were allowed extra units in their development as long as they were designated low and moderate income, and they had to be sold that way. But what protects that type of designation when the house flips several times?
So typically, we require a covenant or some other restriction that rides with the property that requires those units to remain affordable for a certain amount of time. The main ones that we have currently in the city were done under redevelopment, which required those restricted covenants, but also that is primarily multifamily development. For single-family development, today we would require those kind of covenants, but I'm uncertain what was required in the 90s or 80s or before. But there is a state law that supersedes the city's regulations in terms of allowing the density bonuses, and so we're required to give a density bonus under the state's regulations when the development achieves certain affordability for certain units. And there's a sliding scale, and it's kind of a math problem to figure out. But we enforce that through restrictive covenants that are recorded against the property.
And who enforces that? We don't follow up on it to see if it's enforced. Who does?
So in the last 15 years, any units that have been built that way have a monitoring requirement. So actually, the city does monitor, and we require the property owner to reimburse us for our costs to do that monitoring. But I can't speak to, again, any units that were built earlier or any single-family units. The city does have affordability covenants on 3 single-family units that are for sale that were made affordable to low-income families. That was a redevelopment project that was kind of a holdover, was implemented after dissolution, and the city developed those lots, and we underwrote the mortgages on that. So we essentially on those units, we are a second lien holder. So any type of financial transaction, the city is involved. So if there's a sale of one of those units in the future, we are involved with that transaction. We have to approve it unless we are made whole first. And because of the level of subsidy, it's not likely that's going to happen in many years for those
Okay, but
sites.
homes that were built before then, and there were quite a few on the single-family tracts that went in, a lot of those developers applied for the bonus densities to get an extra 2 and 3 homes. Now, looking at the homes from the outside, you couldn't tell that they were low and moderate income, but they were. So we have no way right now of telling whether those are still occupied by low or moderate income owners, right?
I'd have to know specific locations to be able to do the research.
Well, it seems like we, in our records, would have a record of that, since we're the ones that gave the bonus densities. So I'd like you to look into that, because I'm curious about that. And they were not multiple family, just single family.
I would add, if I may, Madam Mayor, the requirement came into place, I believe it was early 2002, that required that to the extent you are seeking affordable housing benefits and density bonuses, if it's a rental unit, it's a 55-year covenant that gets recorded. If it's a single-family owner-occupied, it's 45-year covenants. Before that time, there weren't those strict long-term covenant requirements that came into place. So I remember having some prior obligations where it was a 10-year covenant period and then it just sort of goes away. So it's possible that some of your older development that qualified for certain benefits in exchange for committing to affordable units predated those long covenant period, that legislation. I think it was, I want to say it was like 2002 when the legislation came into place. So
That's what I was afraid of, was that the developers got the bonus densities, and yet it didn't stay low and moderate income. Okay. I've got a lot more notes that I could go into, but I won't. I'm not happy with it. I guess I kind of understand how these properties were selected, but there's got to be a lot of modifications because some of these areas just don't make sense to me at all. So, Matt, I would like for staff to put together a council workshop ASAP, whether it's this week, next week, or whatever. I know we're under a timeline. This has to be submitted by October. A lot of work has to go into this, but I think it's very critical that we're allowed to really pour through this, possibly parcel by parcel, understand the numbers and understand what any kind of modification means. And we need input from the people whose properties are designated RD30, because just to slap a number on a piece of property and say, well, that's what it's going to be is ridiculous. Now, years ago, back in the 80s, 90s, we designated the Central Avenue corridor as mixed use. What the dream was that there would be commercial on the bottom and apartments and stuff on the top, and it has never been built. So mixed use, we've tried and not been successful. Now, I'm not going to say that it'll never work. I mean, it would be ideal if it would, especially in the right setting, because then you've got support for the businesses. But we've also been told that we've got too much commercial in our community and that no more commercial is going to be built. So I think we're in a catch-22 when it comes to that, whether this is really doable or not. We have a lot of work to do. And I think rather than wait for it to go back to the committee and to the Planning Commission, then finally come to us, it's my desire that we get involved right now, ASAP.
Mayor, I have a question.
Yes.
When we, with the workshop, which I think is also a great idea, can we invite the members of the steering committee so they can provide input to us as well?
Of course.
And should we invite these parcel owners who
No,
have
not
been
yet.
identified? Not yet?
Not
Okay.
yet.
Okay.
No, because I think there's going to be a lot of
Lot of
changes to
changes?
these. And,
Okay.
and we need to understand
Okay.
also.
Thank you, Mayor.
Also, I want to bring out something that you clarified for me. We could identify it as RD30 and say it's supposed to be low and moderate income. But if a developer comes along and says, I want to build RD30, but I'm not going to make it low income, we have to allow that and then find another parcel of land to designate RD30 low income. So even though the state is forcing us to make that designation, we can't enforce it. It's the whole thing is it's like one hand tied behind our back.
Which is why we have to shoot for a sites inventory that exceeds our number, so there's some margin for those decisions and capacity for the council to make some of those decisions down the road. But it is well within the council's purview to tell us, well, we don't need a 30% margin, we want a 10%, or we want a 5%, or shave it as close as you can. That's the input that we'll be getting.
But the other thing too, Nick, is once it's designated RD30, we can't drop the designation lower either.
We cannot. We have to find replacement land. So once it's designated as a site in the housing element per the state requirements, if that site were to be removed or developed as something else, we would have to find another site that has equivalent yield of units at that density. So it's really the state is forcing the cities into a box on this and saying, cities, you've got to give this up, you've got to allow this in this configuration, and it's no more just good enough to say we have sites available. They're really trying to push it. City, you have to do everything you can to make these sites work. And we are very limited because we no longer have housing set aside. We no longer have that redevelopment tool that we had where we had a dedicated income stream. Now the state says, well, we're doing something better. We put this fee on the deeds and we have these other things, but you can apply for it in a grant. Okay, well, that's great, and that might be good for cities like Oakland and San Jose and things like that, where they have that ability and the economics work. But a city like Chino, that's a suburb where the land values are more difficult to facilitate. It's much harder. And so, the strategy is looking at partnering somebody like Bridge Housing or Jamboree or something that can bring together enough tax credits and enough private investment to subsidize those units to make it work. But really, there's not enough subsidy that exists in the state to meet the existing demand, or I should say from the previous cycle, let alone all of the numbers that the state is looking for in the Southern California region for the new cycle. So it is unfortunate. The RENA policy tool from a planning perspective doesn't work. But unfortunately, as staff, we are in a position where we have to show the council how to get to technical compliance. We have a bunch of laws that keep being added to every year by the legislature that ratchet up those requirements. And so here we are where we have this now public policy problem that we have to figure out how to work through. So
It's tragic.
sorry,
It's tragic. It's truly tragic. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Nick, for coming this evening. Don't mean to shoot the messenger.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chen.
Okay, this is just to receive the report. Mark, yes. Mr. Hargrove?
No, I'm good, Mayor.
Oh, okay.
I'm good, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. We don't really need to take a motion in a second on this, true? It's just to receive the report, isn't that correct?
That's right. It's just
Okay.
a receive and file. I think it's just for record-keeping purposes that the council is actually consider the discussion that is sought for a motion in a second, but not really technically required.
Okay, then we won't bother with the motion.
We'll go ahead and move forward with the workshop as requested, as long as the council's good with that, and we'll prepare for that, and we'll have that done within the next week.
Okay, thank you very much. Next on the agenda is mayor and council reports. Mine's going to be very quick. Let's see, on February, all of these were virtually attended. 17th was the mayor's prayer breakfast. The 18th was confidential water master appropriative pool meeting, and then the water master advisory committee. The 19th, appropriative pool. The 19th was the West Valley Mosquito and Vector Control District's ad hoc committee to review the responses to an RFP for legal services. And then on the 23rd was the actual board of directors of the West Valley Mosquito and Vector Control District. Mayor Pro Tem Lucio.
Yes, my report's pretty short as well. On February 17th, we did a virtual meeting with Madison Capital regarding a potential project that they want to develop in the city. I don't think in the area that they wanted was something that would have fit the community's need. So I think they were looking at other possible areas within the city. I did want to talk about on February 25th, Los Angeles County Sheriff Deputy Thomas Albanese was tragically killed in a traffic accident in the city of Lakewood. He was a 7-year veteran. The reason I'm bringing it up is Los Petrales restaurant, both in Chino and in Montclair, are going to be holding a fundraiser for the family starting March 7th, running through the 14th, and 20% of all the proceeds of the sale of any of the food that's sold there will go to the family. So I just wanted to thank them for that, and also to let the community know that that's going to be taking place. And then also on the 16th of March, we're going to be having a blood drive from 10 to 4. It'll be on Tuesday before the council meeting, and that's going to be held in the community building at 5443 B Street. And if you go onto the Red Cross website and type in Chino B Street, you can sign up to donate blood. I try to donate blood on a regular basis. It's just something that me and my wife have always done, and it's important, especially during this time, to give if you can donate blood, donate. And that's all I have for today.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Comstock.
Thank you, Mayor. On February 17th, I virtually attended the Omnitrans new board member orientation. And on February 18th, I attended a meeting with the city manager and Development Services Director Ligori on Norton Avenue south of Philadelphia Street to discuss some potential recommendations to improvements to the sidewalk and access specific to that area. And on February 18th, I virtually attended the Chino Valley Unified School District meeting online. It was actually nice to see the board and the superintendent back up on the dais. As you know, they've got some pretty tough problems there. They did vote to bring the kids back to school on a blended learning, K through 6th grade, but that is certainly going to be a difficult challenge moving forward. They didn't vote that night, they voted at a special meeting, but it is a nice first step forward, depending on who you ask. But I am happy to see our kids, trying to get back to school. On February 22nd, I attended the Community Services Commission meeting in person. It was a good and constructive meeting and a lot of good work being done by Dr. Reich and her staff there. So that was nice to see. On February 24th, I met with Mr. Barr at the Spectrum Shopping Center to discuss his concerns regarding some engineering and access to this area between Highway 71 and Pipeline Avenue. Also, on February 25th, I met with him once again to learn how he provides feedback and information to our city staff on development and engineering in the Meritage landmark community. I'm actually experiencing, as a resident there, some frustrations with some of the development going on there. On March 1st, I, along with City Manager Ballantyne and Dr. Reich, attended a meeting with County Supervisor Hagman at the Yorba Adobe Slaughterhouse, the historical site. It's a neat historical site. We listened to the county supervisor talk about some of his vision for the area. Mayor, I know you've shared with me some of your vision for that area as well. So it was just a constructive meeting with him and staff. Then I also corresponded to kind of piggyback on Ms. Marchese's comments earlier this evening. I corresponded with a resident by the name of Cesar Hurtado, who lives in the area of Yorba and Park Avenue, about that specific complaint about cars and parking and general quality of life concerns. And it kind of piggybacked on a concern I had from our correspondent with a resident who lives off of Yorba in like the Doheny or Oceanside area. I've gone over there, you're right, that the parking, because of the density, has become very challenging, as well as the inability for street sweeping and other things that are occurring over there. So it's real. And then last, Mayor, it's Women's History Month, and I just want to thank you, Mayor, for being a great mentor and everything you've done for the community, to me, to all the contributions that women make, not just to our families, but to our society, professionally and personally. And of course, the most important, a few of the most important women in my life were certainly my great-grandmother, my grandmother, and not to mention, also to mention my mom, Christine. She's been, a part of this development into the person I am. So thank you to all the women who are making great contributions to our community and to our world. So thank you, Mayor. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Flores.
Let's see, on February 22nd, I virtually attended the Chino Valley Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors meeting. Yesterday, March 1st, I attended the Planning Commission meeting in person. And I just want to lastly say I want to thank all the residents and people who came up and spoke today and shared their opinions about the the housing element. I just want you guys to know that your recommendations are definitely we received that. So thank you. That concludes my report, Mayor.
Okay, Councilman Hargrove.
Nope, I don't have any comments, Mayor.
Okay, City Manager Ballantyne.
I have no report, Mayor.
City Attorney Galante.
Just briefly, I think it's just relevant to our prior discussion. When I attended the appeal of the RENA allocation to the city of Chino, the appeals board on SCAG was, I believe, very conflicted, and I know Mr. Ligori was on to participate in the call as well. Even though we got the chair of the particular committee, the mayor of Yorba Linda, to vote in favor of redoing the city's allocation, the rest of the board felt conflicted because they have such limited authority under state law. In light of that, some jurisdictions are looking into what legal options there are to address what is believed to be some statutory violations by HCD in creating the RENA allocation. So I don't think the story or that chapter is totally closed. I think Chino obviously is not alone in trying to address a pretty significant allocation. So I think the story will continue. But
Can we join that effort?
yes, I think that may become a broader effort, not just certain jurisdictions. Obviously, we're within the SCAG region, but it impacts jurisdictions outside the SCAG region. And if more than just the SCAG jurisdictions contribute to this, the SCAG last month had a closed session to consider legal options, but I understand just the conclusion is there's no action to take any legal steps to challenge HCD, but that has come at some frustration to other jurisdictions that we're hoping SCAG would take up the fight.
Well, if they don't, I think it's really incumbent upon all communities who object to this to join together, because the system's broken. It's
Right.
clearly broken. I mean, all of the units that have been designated low income, this RD30, they can't even build them. It's ridiculous.
Right.
So I think I would encourage us to join the effort.
Yep.
If you'll keep us informed on any kind of progress or what's happening, I would appreciate it.
I absolutely will. Thank you. That's all I have.
Fred, I have a question. Is the league leading anything of California cities pertaining to that? No?
No.
That's a shame. That's a real shame.
You know, I represent the Orange County Council of Governments as their general counsel, and they voiced a lot of concerns. We wrote a letter to HCD. We wrote a letter to SCAG. It hasn't really produced much outcome, so I think there are various agencies looking into this issue.
I think we should unite.
And Fred, I know these numbers are put on by the state, but let's say the recall effort occurs and the governor is replaced. Would a new governor change these numbers, or would they still remain and move forward?
You know, it's really outside the governor's hands at this point. There was some discussion previously about the fact that, the census numbers, I don't think, comported with the assumptions that were made under the RENA calculations, and that maybe there's a need to adjust that, but nothing ever materialized. So it doesn't seem like the governor really would have that authority. It's really a legislative action that needs to occur. I know I've personally worked on a bill that is being presented to address one particular issue in trying to fix RENA. There was a legal challenge about 10 years ago that actually OCOG was part of that lawsuit, where the city of Irvine sued SCAG for its allocation of units, SCAG units, RENA units. And the conclusion by the court was they're not really empowered to reallocate units, because when you take away some units from one jurisdiction, it will cause other jurisdictions to get a larger allocation, and those jurisdictions weren't parties to the case, so the court explained in its opinion that it didn't find it appropriate to intervene and allocate units to non-parties. So the legislation that is being proposed is trying to fix that particular problem, but actually address other issues to try to hold HCD accountable as well. So hopefully that, both the legislative side and maybe even judicial challenge will bring the right result.
Okay.
No report tonight, Mayor.
No report from our chief of police? Jeez. Okay, Wes. We have the real fire chief here this evening.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening.
Good evening, Council. Just one item tonight from the Fire District. Just happy to share with you that we have 10 firefighter paramedic candidates completing background, and they will start with us on the 15th of March.
Terrific.
Excited about that. That will help out with our staffing, so we're
Well, I
very
would
happy.
like you to bring them to our council meeting and
I will work with the city
introduce
manager to
the
do that.
community.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we are adjourned to our next regular meeting on March 16th at 7 o'clock, and if we need closed session, that will be held at 6 o'clock. Have a good evening. We are adjourned.